exploring Victorian literature, themes, writers, and context. Hey bookworms and history buffs, welcome back to Get Lit. Today, we're stepping back in time to explore one of the most fascinating periods in literary history, the Victorian Era, a time that not only told incredible stories, but also fundamentally transformed how people understood their world. Now, the Victorian Era is most accurately defined by Queen Victoria's reign, which began in 1837. However, many scholars see 1832 as a significant year in shaping what would become Victorian culture, seeing it as a prelude to the full-blown Victorian age. That year saw two major events: the passing of the first Reform Bill, which began reshaping British politics, and the death of Sir Walter Scott, the last great romantic writer. It seemed as if the universe itself was marking the end of one era and the beginning of another. And you know, the Victorian period brought with it all kinds of massive changes that would shape literature for generations to come. And to really understand Victorian literature, we need to explore four huge themes that defined this period. Industrialism, which was the growth of cities and factories that dramatically altered the world. Religious doubt, as science began to challenge traditional faith. The woman question, which was how they discussed the debate about women's roles in society. And finally, imperialism, as Britain's colonial power spread throughout the globe. These weren't just passing concerns, they were major forces that transformed society and literature. Picture this: Victorian Britain was undergoing changes that would transform your understanding of the world. Cities were exploding with growth as people abandoned their rural lives and the middle class was rising to power. You had factory workers, the new proletariat, struggling to survive in often horrific industrial conditions. And you had economists preaching laissez-faire, basically hands-off government, while social reformers and early socialists were fighting for workers' rights. And all this while Britain was becoming a global power, building an empire where the sun never sets. It was a time of both incredible progress and injustice, and the authors of the day were trying to make sense of it all. Now, the Victorian era gave us some of literature's most brilliant minds, each one grappling with their rapidly changing world in their own unique way. Let's meet these amazing writers. There's Elizabeth Barrett Browning and Robert Browning. Now there's a power couple. Elizabeth revolutionized how we think about women's voices in poetry, tackling everything from social reform to those iconic lines in her sonnets from the Portuguese, "How do I love thee? Let me count the ways." Her husband Robert mastered the dramatic monologue, letting us peek into the minds of all sorts of fascinating characters, some of them pretty disturbing. He was all about exploring the complexities of the human psyche in his powerful poems like My Last Duchess. Then you have Alfred, Lord Tennyson, who became the voice of the Victorian age as poet laureate, always balancing tradition with a sense of modernity, and whose elegiac poem Ulysses remains one of the most well-known pieces of Victorian verse. And at the same time, Charles Dickens was transforming the novel form, using his unforgettable characters in works like Oliver Twist and Bleak House to expose social injustice and the dark side of industrialization. His stories weren't just entertainment, they actually helped to change laws. And then there was Christina Rossetti, whose deeply spiritual poetry explored the conflict between religious devotion and earthly desire, and who, after experiencing the loss of her brother and her own struggles with illness, created these truly profound and haunting lyrics. Thomas Hardy explored human tragedy in novels like Tess of the D'Urbervilles and Jude the Obscure, using traditional narrative forms to challenge the accepted norms of the time. As we move into the later Victorian period, we see writers really starting to push boundaries. Henry James brought psychological complexity to new heights in his novels, delving into the nuances of human emotion with his own very specific style. Oscar Wilde used his razor-sharp wit to expose Victorian hypocrisy in plays like The Importance of Being Earnest, and then also George Bernard Shaw, who revolutionised the world of theatre with plays that tackled social issues head-on, always looking to challenge our established ways of thinking. Then you also had Joseph Conrad and Rudyard Kipling, who gave us these incredibly different perspectives on British imperialism. Conrad often questioning it through novels like Heart of Darkness, while Kipling often celebrated it, although his exploration of empire was also incredibly complex. And then there was A.E. Housman, who captured a specific kind of melancholy in his poetry that spoke to the era's underlying anxieties. And you also had William Butler Yeats, who was bridging the Victorian and modern sensibilities with his mystical, symbolic poetry. And let's not forget Hector Hugh Munro, better known as Saki, who was using sharp satire to poke fun at Victorian society's stuffiness with his short stories. It was like this incredibly diverse group of writers who were each trying to make sense of the world in their own way. And what's so fascinating about all these writers is how they responded to their changing world. Whether they were embracing or resisting change, celebrating the empire or questioning it, finding comfort in faith or wrestling with doubt, they were all trying to make sense of a world that was constantly transforming before their eyes. And their unique approaches are what made their work so compelling. So if you haven't explored the Victorian era and these incredible writers, what are you waiting for? Seriously, dive in. Let their lives and their words take you on a journey into a world that continues to be relevant today. For example, modern works often draw from Victorian themes, such as the steampunk genre, which imagines a world powered by Victorian-era technology and aesthetics. And let me know what you think in the comments. What writers and stories resonated with you the most? What did you learn about the Victorian era and its impact today? I can't wait to hear. Thanks for joining me on this Victorian era deep dive. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more literary adventures on Get Lit. Until next time, happy reading.